The stars shimmered like diamonds scattered across the void, serene and undisturbed. The Zevo Dominion, an empire spanning over 100 systems, had grown complacent. Their fleets were unmatched, their technology superior, their conquests effortless. And yet, as they prepared to crush another rebellious world, they made one fatal mistake. They assumed humanity wouldn't come. Kesser Prime was nothing more than a mining colony, a backwater world with a small, struggling population. The Zevo fleet surrounded it like a pack of predators circling a wounded animal. The planetary defenses were primitive, barely worth acknowledging. The governor of the Zevo forces, Lord General Ven, watched from the bridge of his dreadnought, a cruel smirk stretching across his reptilian features. "This will be over before their sun sets," he muttered, his clawed fingers tapping the armrest of his command throne. "Prepare the bombardment." A Zevo officer turned from his console, his scaled face showing no emotion. "Sir, long-range sensors have detected an anomaly at the system's edge." Ven waved a dismissive hand. "Likely a malfunction, our dominance is absolute. Continue the assault." But before the first plasma round could be fired, the anomaly resolved itself into something terrifying. A rupture in space, a distortion unlike anything the Zevo had ever encountered. And then, from the void, they arrived. The Terran fleet, sleek black warships bristling with weapons, emerged from slip space in tight formation. Their hulls bore no unnecessary markings, only the insignia of the United Terran Defense Force, an unbroken silver ring encircling a single burning star. Humanity had come. For too long, the galaxy had underestimated them, seen as a young, reckless species. They had been dismissed as insignificant, but the humans had been watching, learning, waiting, and now they had chosen their moment. "Sir," the Zevo officer's voice carried an edge of something Ven had never heard before, fear. "The Terran ships are locking onto us." Ven's smirk faltered. "Impossible, humans have never." The first shot fired wasn't a warning. It was an execution. A lance of searing blue energy speared through a Zevo destroyer at the fleet's edge, cutting it in half before its crew could even react. And then the void erupted with fire. The Terran fleet moved like no force the Zevo had ever faced. Their ships were faster, more coordinated, striking with lethal precision. While the Dominion had relied on sheer numbers and overwhelming brutality, humanity had perfected something far deadlier: efficiency. Ven watched in stunned silence as another cruiser was torn apart by a barrage of hypervelocity rounds, its armor shredded like paper. He barely had time to bark an order before the next explosion rocked his dreadnought, sending tremors through the deck. This is not possible," he snarled. "They should not be here." But they were, and they weren't stopping. For the first time in centuries, the Zevo Dominion found itself on the defensive. Their mighty fleet, feared across the stars, was being torn apart by the one species they had dismissed as weak. The humans weren't just fighting, they were hunting, and they were winning. Vaughn gritted his teeth, watching the Terran fleet tear through his forces like a storm of steel and fire. He had underestimated them. The Dominion had underestimated them, and now they would all pay the price. Panic rippled through the Zevo fleet like a virus. Their carefully maintained formations crumbled under the relentless assault. What should have been an easy conquest was rapidly turning into a massacre. Lord General Ven gripped the armrests of his command throne, his claws digging into the metal. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. This wasn't how wars were fought in the Dominion. Battles were meant to be one-sided, swift, merciless. The enemy was supposed to kneel, not strike back with terrifying precision. "Pull back to the second defense line," he barked. His officers scrambled to obey, sending hasty commands through the chaotic channels. The remaining Zevo warships broke away from the wreckage of their comrades, forming a desperate defensive perimeter. Plasma turrets swiveled, missile bays unlocked, shields roared to life. But the humans didn't pause, they didn't hesitate. A squadron of Terran frigates punched through the gaps in the Zevo formation like knives through flesh. Their weapons didn't just disable, they annihilated. The humans fought like they had something to prove. Ven narrowed his eyes. No, not something to prove, something to avenge. "Sir," a Zevo officer's voice trembled, "we've lost contact with 2 more warships, and our jamming fields aren't working. They're bypassing all electronic interference." Ven's scaled brow furrowed. Impossible. The Dominion had dominated every species it encountered. No one had technology beyond their own. But humanity wasn't just another species, and that terrified him. A new transmission crackled through the Dreadnought's command deck, forcing itself through the Dominion's encrypted channels like an uninvited guest. "Zevo Fleet, this is Admiral Elias Rains of the United Terran Defense Force." The voice was calm, unyielding. "You have one chance. Leave the system immediately or be reduced to debris." Silence swallowed the bridge. No one spoke. Even Ven felt his throat tighten. A demand from a human. He slammed his fist against the armrest, standing so abruptly his command chair screeched against the floor. "They dare demand terms from us." His second-in-command hesitated. "Sir, we are significantly outgunned. Our reinforcements are hours away." "The Terran fleet is an annoyance," Ven growled, "not a threat. We hold our ground." But deep down, he knew that was a lie. The Zevo Dominion had never encountered a force like this before. The humans weren't relying on brute force or superior numbers. They were surgical, efficient, and worst of all, they were relentless. Another explosion rocked the Dreadnought as the Terran battleships pressed forward, their cannons hammering into Zevo shields, tearing apart once mighty warships like they were made of brittle glass. Ven's confidence faltered. His fleet was dying, and for the first time in his long military career, he felt something cold wrap around his chest: fear. The Zevo fleet was unraveling. The once-proud warships of the Dominion, known across the galaxy as unstoppable engines of conquest, were now reduced to burning wrecks. Debris drifted through the void, the shattered remains of vessels that had once brought entire civilizations to their knees. Lord General Ven could hardly process what was happening. His mind refused to accept the sheer brutality of the human assault. The Dominion had faced resistance before: rebellions, uprisings, even coordinated fleets of defiant species clinging to their worthless independence. But nothing like this. Humanity wasn't resisting, they were annihilating. "Sir, the Dreadnought carrier is gone. It was torn apart by some kind of kinetic bombardment. No energy signature, just raw mass moving at impossible speeds." Ven's breath caught in his throat. That wasn't Dominion warfare. That wasn't how battles were fought. Energy weapons, plasma cannons, and shielded engagements had ruled the void for centuries. But the humans had perfected something terrifyingly simple. They were throwing solid projectiles at relativistic speeds, using gravity itself as a weapon. No shielding could compensate for that. No Dominion ship was designed to withstand such raw, unstoppable force. And they knew it. The Terran fleet moved like a pack of wolves, isolating stragglers, hammering weak points, cutting the Zevo apart piece by piece. They were ruthless, precise. There was no waste, no hesitation, no mercy. Ven's claws dug into his palms. His officers were waiting for orders, for guidance, for something, anything. But what could he say? "Sir," a younger officer stammered, breaking protocol by speaking without permission, his scaled skin pale, his wide eyes locked onto the tactical display. "There! They're leaving us an opening." Ven's head snapped up. "What?" The officer pointed at the star chart. The humans had systematically dismantled the Zevo formation, driving them into a tightening spiral of destruction. But now, at the very edge of the battlefield, there was a gap, a narrow corridor leading away from Kessler Prime toward the hyperlane exit. "They're letting us escape," another officer whispered, disbelief laced in every word. Ven's mouth twisted into a snarl. Letting them escape, as if they were vermin spared only because extermination wasn't worth the effort. "No," he hissed, "we fight to the last." But his crew didn't share his conviction. They exchanged uncertain glances, their bodies tense, their hands trembling over their consoles. They had seen the impossible today. They had seen what the humans could do, and they wanted to live. Another explosion rattled the bridge. The shields were failing. The armor was buckling. The Dreadnought itself, the pride of the Dominion's armada, was moments away from being torn apart like all the others. A second transmission came through. This time the human admiral's voice carried no emotion. "Last chance." Ven's claws flexed. His pride screamed at him to fight, to defy, to show these humans that the Zevo Dominion never surrendered. But then he looked at the display, at what remained of his fleet, at the ghosts of the ships that once surrounded him. And for the first time in his life, Lord General Ven issued the order he had sworn he never would. "All remaining ships withdraw." The bridge was silent. Then one by one his officers moved. The surviving Zevo warships turned, retreating through the gap humanity had left for them, their weapons silent, their pride shattered. Ven's hands trembled. He felt hollow. The Dominion had never lost a battle like this, and yet today they had not only lost, they had been humiliated. As the remnants of the once mighty Zevo fleet limped away from Kesser Prime, silence filled the bridge of Ven's dreadnought. It wasn't the silence of discipline or of solemn duty. It was the silence of shame. They had been broken, not in a way lesser species crumbled before the Dominion's might, but in a way that cut far deeper. The humans had not merely defeated them. They had allowed them to flee, like predators sparing wounded prey too insignificant to waste energy on. Ven's claws dug into the armrests of his command throne. His officers dared not speak. They could feel the weight of failure pressing down on them all. The Dominion did not retreat. It did not surrender. It never bent to the will of another. And yet here they were, running. A deep growl rumbled from Ven's throat as he stared at the tactical display. The Terran fleet had not pursued. They had not tried to wipe them from existence. Instead, they held their position over Kesser Prime as if daring the Dominion to try again. Arrogance? No, confidence. Ven clenched his fists. How had they grown so powerful, so capable? Humanity had been dismissed as an upstart species, one of many scattered civilizations with potential but no real threat to the galactic order. They lacked numbers, they lacked expansion, they lacked fear. But now the truth was undeniable. The humans were beyond fear. Lord General, a Zevo officer hesitated before speaking, shall we transmit a report to High Command? Ven's eyes narrowed. What would he even say? That the Dominion's most elite fleet had been slaughtered. That a single Terran armada had reduced them to fleeing cowards. That humanity, the barely acknowledged species, had just rewritten everything the Zevo believed about their dominance. No, that report would come later. But first, he needed to understand what had just happened. His claws tapped against the armrest in slow, methodical movements. "We will return to Zevo Prime," he said at last. "No word of this is to leave this ship until I say otherwise." The officers exchanged weary glances but obeyed. The Dominion's honor had already been tarnished today. There was no need to spread their disgrace before they could find a way to avenge it. Ven turned back towards the viewport, staring at the distant stars. Humanity had won this day, but he would ensure that, one way or another, this war was far from over. As the Zevo fleet retreated into the cold abyss of space, Lord General Ven sat motionless in his command throne, his mind a storm of disbelief and rage. The battle, the humiliation, played over and over in his mind like a haunting vision. It had been no ordinary defeat. No, this was something far worse. The Dominion had always operated under the assumption that they were the pinnacle of military power, that no species, no matter how ambitious or rebellious, could challenge their dominion over the stars. But today, humanity had shattered that illusion, and they had done so with terrifying precision. The humans had not just fought, they had studied the Zevo. They had adapted, exploited weaknesses, and used weapons the Dominion had no counter for. This was not the reckless bravery of an inferior species flailing against an empire. This was cold, calculated annihilation. Ven's fists clenched. "Sir," a hesitant voice interrupted his thoughts. Ven turned his gaze towards the officer standing near the communication terminal. The younger Zevo's scales were pale, his posture uncertain. Even his voice betrayed something unthinkable for a Dominion officer: hesitation. "What?" Ven snapped. The officer flinched but held his ground. "High Command is requesting an immediate battle report." Ven exhaled sharply through his nostrils. Of course they were. The moment the Dominion fleet had warped into the Kesser Prime system, victory had already been assumed. The higher ranks likely expected a report detailing yet another world crushed under the Zevo boot. But that was not the report they would receive. He stared at the blank, hollow screen before him. He could already see their reactions: the disbelief, the scorn, the demands for an explanation. His name would be dragged through the halls of power as a commander who had failed. The Dominion had not suffered a loss of this magnitude in generations, and it had happened under his watch. His officers were waiting for him to lie, to dress up the battle as a mere strategic withdrawal, to maintain the illusion of the Dominion's invincibility. But what good would a lie do? The humans had proven themselves, and that fact would not change, no matter how much the Dominion tried to deny it. Ven's claws tapped against the armrest. His voice, when he spoke, was lower, measured. "Transmit only the essentials. Inform High Command that we encountered an unexpected resistance force at Kesser Prime." The officer hesitated. Should we identify them? Ven's eyes narrowed. The answer should have been obvious, but something in his gut told him that naming humanity directly, admitting that the great Zevo Dominion had been bested not by some vast, ancient power, but by humans, would send ripples of uncertainty through the Empire. No, he said finally, not yet. The officer nodded and relayed the message. The bridge remained eerily silent. No one dared to speak. They all understood what had happened today, and despite their best efforts, none of them could escape the truth. Ven turned back toward the viewport. Kessler Prime was now a distant speck of light, but he could still see the Terran fleet in his mind's eye, watching, waiting, daring the Dominion to return. They had underestimated humanity. That would not happen again. The Dominion did not accept rivals. If humanity wished to challenge their rule, then they would be crushed, no matter how long it took. Ven's claws dug into the armrest one last time. This is not over. The silence on the bridge of Ven's dreadnought was suffocating. No one spoke. No one moved.